On a stormy night, you find shelter in a desolate village inn. The only vacant room sits beside one where the corpse of a young man lies. As the innkeeper hands you an oil lamp, he leans in and whispers, "No matter what you hear tonight, don't open the door, and whatever you do, don't look through the peephole." Come midnight, there's a knock at your door. Peering through the peephole, you're stunned to see the dead man's face from the next room staring back at you. You brace the door with all your strength as the sound of fingernails scratching against the wooden panel scrapes at your sanity. Suddenly, the scratching stops. A cold, hoarse voice slithers through the crack beneath the door. "Open up! I saw your light! Panic-stricken, you blow out the oil lamp!" Silence follows, broken only by the fading sound of footsteps retreating into the rain. Just as you exhale in relief, there's a creak behind you. The lid of a coffin slowly groans open. Somehow, the corpse that should be next door is now lying beneath your bed, inside a coffin, slowly sitting upright. Cold rain lashes at you like a whip. Your thin clothes are soaked through, clinging to your skin, biting with icy chill. The wagon wheels sink deep into the mud. No matter how hard you flog the bony old horse, it only snorts heavily and scrapes at the ground in vain. The sharp snap of a broken axle cuts through the steady downpour like a crack of thunder. Cursing under your breath, you look around. The night is pitch black, swallowing everything. In the distant hills, a faint, flickering yellow light sways in the storm like the last breath of a drowning man. Abandoning the broken cart, you stagger through the mud toward that feeble light. As you approach, you see it comes from an old, two-story wooden inn. Its crooked sign creaks in the wind. The faded characters barely legible Gi Lin Inn. The front door hangs ajar. You push it open, bringing in a gust of damp, bloody wind and muddy footprints. The main hall is dimly lit. A single oil lamp flickers like a ghost on the counter. Behind it, an old man with a hunched back and white hair slowly wipes a chipped porcelain bowl with a gray rag. He looks up, his murky eyes sweeping over your drenched form. He says nothing, but his gaze chills you to the bone. "Innkeeper, a room, please," you say, wiping rain off your face, your voice laced with desperation. "And something hot to eat?" The old man sets down the cracked bowl, letting out a phlegmy gurgle. "All full," he rasps. Your heart sinks. Just as you're about to plead again, a younger man parts the back curtain and steps into view. He resembles the old man but has a sickly, pale complexion. He glances at you, murmurs a few words to the elder. The old man scowls, then gives you a long, heavy look as if weighing a bad omen. After a moment, he grumbles reluctantly. There's a small side room left on the west end. He hesitates, lowering his voice to a warning. "There's a guest in the next room, desperate for shelter." You nod quickly. "It's fine, really, as long as there's a roof." The old man says no more. He pulls a dusty oil lamp from beneath the counter and strikes a flint to light it. The tiny flame flickers, casting gnarled shadows across his bony hands. As he hands it to you, his fingers brush yours cold and slick, like a snake's shed skin. His cloudy eyes fix on yours. Though his lips barely move, his hoarse whisper cuts straight into your ear. "No matter what you hear tonight, don't open the door." He swallows hard, Adam's apple bobbing, then adds in a grim, deliberate tone, "And don't look through the peephole." A chill shoots from your tailbone to the top of your skull. You take the lamp, but its weak glow does nothing to warm the ice spreading through your chest. The old man signals his son to lead the way. The young man silently picks up a smaller storm lantern. Its dim yellow light barely lights 3 steps ahead. He leads you down a narrow, shadowy corridor. The doors on either side are tightly shut. Not a sound. It feels like something ancient and malevolent sleeps behind them. The air reeks of rotting wood and a strange, metallic, sweet scent like rust laced with cheap perfume. At the corridor's end, a worn wooden door stands ajar. The young man stops. The lantern's glow sways slightly, revealing deep scratch marks on the doorframe, fresh, with splinters still curling out. He steps aside to let you in, never once meeting your gaze. The room is pathetically small, just enough for a bed, a table, and a stool. But what grips your gut with dread is the coffin against the wall. A deep black coffin, its lid slightly open, revealing a dark gap like a mouth waiting to swallow. The sickly sweet metallic scent is stronger here, seeping from the coffin's depths. Next door is the morgue. The old man's warning echoes in your head. Only a thin wooden wall separates the two rooms. You can clearly hear soft sobs next door, a woman's muffled voice muttering about injustice and so cold, over and over again. The crying drifts in and out, like strands of silk in dead air, adding to the room's eerie weight. You set the lamp down, too exhausted and chilled to care anymore. You blow out the wick and curl yourself under the damp, musty blanket. The crying fades away. Only the endless rain and howling wind remain outside the window. Fatigue crashes over you like a wave. Your mind begins to drift. Time becomes a blur. Could be an hour, could be seconds. You jolt awake. The rain and wind have stopped cut off as if a giant hand smothered the world. Silence. So complete, you can hear the roar of your own blood in your ears. And then, in that breathless void, knock, knock, knock. Slow, stiff, methodical. Someone is knocking, right outside your door. Your blood rushes to your head, then freezes to ice. The old man's raspy warning explodes in your skull. Don't open the door. Don't look through the peephole. You bite your lip so hard it nearly bleeds. Curled in a ball, you barely breathe. In the dark, only your heart pounds wild and thunderous. The knocking pauses, then resumes. Slower, heavier. Each knock is a hammer on your nerves. It won't stop. Whatever's out there has all the time in the world. No! You have to know what it is. The thought claws at your sanity. The unknown will drive you mad before it even gets in. As if pulled by invisible strings, you rise slow, reluctant. Cold sweat soaks your back. Barefoot, you step onto the rough, icy floor. Each step feels like walking on blades. You hold your breath, inching toward the door like a clumsy thief. The coffin lurks beside you in the dark, silent and brooding. Finally, you reach the door. Beyond the thin wooden panel, absolute stillness. The knocking has stopped. You rise onto your toes, eyes twitching, inching toward the tiny peephole in the door. The brass rim is icy against your brow. You open your aching eyes wide and strain to see. Through the distorted fisheye lens, a blur of murky yellow emerges that dim halo from the lantern at the end of the hall. At the edge of the light, a face presses against your door, covering most of the peephole. A young man's face, lifeless, skin ashen gray like wax paper, sunken eye sockets, clouded pupils veiled in milky white, stared dead into the peephole, or rather, through it. Staring right at you. His lips were cracked and purple, slightly parted. The entire face was stiff as stone. Void of any trace of life, it was the very same guest from next door. A short, inhuman gasp escaped your throat before you could stop it. Terror, sharp as an ice pick, pierced through your skull and froze every inch of your body. You stumbled back, slamming into the cold wooden wall with a heavy thud. At that very moment, the corpse's face pressed against the peephole began to stretch its mouth, tugging slowly, rigidly, into a grotesque arc. It wasn't a smile. It looked more like a muscle spasm twisted into a horrifying grimace. Then, suddenly, screech! 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 An unbearable screech exploded in your ears. Fingernails, razor sharp, were clawing violently at the door. The sound was frantic and sharp, hysterical in its madness, like a swarm of rats gnawing through wood with steel teeth, or metal scraping over rough stone. Each scrape cut into your eardrums, your heart. You couldn't hold it back anymore. You shrieked, scrambling away from that door being ravaged by some demonic force. The scratching chased after your fear like maggots to flesh louder, faster, closer. It felt like that thin door would be torn apart any second. It's over. It's coming in. Despair coiled around your heart like poison ivy. You backed into the freezing wall, trembling like a leaf in a storm, eyes darting wildly around the tiny room. The window was boarded shut. The only door was under attack. There was nowhere to run. Your gaze landed on the black coffin in the corner. A thought insane yet strangely tempting struck like lightning. Hide inside. Shut the lid. Maybe it wouldn't find you. The scratching stopped. A silence heavier and stickier than before smothered the room, squeezing the air from your lungs. You stared at the door, heart pounding in your throat. Then, out of that choking stillness, a voice slithered in through the crack at the bottom of the door. It was cold, hoarse, and dry like sandpaper rasping against rotting wood. Each word carried an inhuman chill. Open the door. Every hair on your body stood on end. I saw. The voice paused, then finished with a certainty that froze your blood. Your light. The light! You whipped your head toward the table. That forgotten oil lamp, though, you'd blown it out. The leftover oil in the bowl was catching the faintest glimmer of dawnlight through the window, glowing dimly like a half-open, milky eye. So that's it. That cursed reflection. It saw it. It knows you're in here. Survival instinct roared to life, overpowering fear. Like a cornered beast, you launched yourself at the table with all your strength. Your hands trembled so violently from panic, they barely obeyed. You snatched up the lamp, oil sloshed out, cold and slick across your skin. Without thinking, you hurled the lamp down with all your might. Crash! The shattering burst through the silence like gunfire. Ceramic shards flew, oil splattered everywhere. That last trace of reflection vanished. The room plunged into total, suffocating darkness. You collapsed onto the cold, greasy floor, panting hard. But your ears strained, alert for the faintest sound beyond the door. Silence. A silence so complete it felt like the world had stopped turning. Every second dragged like a lifetime. You clamped a hand over your mouth, terrified your breathing would betray you. At last, tap, 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 slow, dragging footsteps echoed from the hallway outside. The sound was stiff, heavy, like it carried invisible shackles. But it wasn't approaching, it was fading. The footsteps moved away, down the corridor, growing fainter until they vanished into the endless void. Gone? It's gone? Your nerves, stretched to the limit, finally snapped. A wave of dizzying relief crashed over you. You felt like your bones had melted. Sprawled on the slick, oily floor, you gasped for breath. Cold sweat poured from your forehead into your eyes, stinging them. You were alive. Somehow, you'd survived. Tears welled up relief so intense it hurt. Slumped against the table leg, you tried to calm your racing heart and trembling limbs. The chill of the room seeped into your soaked clothes. The oily residue on your hands made your skin crawl. Your knee throbbed, you must have hit something when you dove. And then out of nowhere, creak, A long, dry, tooth-grinding scrape echoed behind you. No warning, just that slow, dreadful sound of heavy wood being pushed open. It was behind you. Every drop of blood in your body froze again. Your neck turned, inch by inch, grinding like rusted gears, toward the sound. The coffin. In the corner. That deep, black coffin. You couldn't see the details in the dark, but the slightly ajar lid was definitely moving slowly, heavily, sliding to the side. The groaning came from where the lid scraped against the box. A vague human shape was rising from within the darker blackness inside the coffin. Slowly, so slowly. The lid creaked like a dying man's final breath. The shadow inside was just a deeper shade of darkness, but it was moving. Then that stench hit you. Cold, sweet, metallic rot, so thick it clung to your skin and throat. It sat up, its stiff neck cracked faintly. Then, the shape began turning slowly, terribly toward you. Run! The word exploded in your head, but your body was paralyzed, numb, frozen, drenched in invisible ice. The shadow finished turning. One arm rose. The motion was jerky and unnatural, like a puppet on strings. The arm extended straight, pointing directly at where you were slumped. Then, its upper body began to tilt forward, joints bending in ways that defied anatomy. It was crawling out. Terror shattered the chains around your body. A strangled cry burst from your throat. You scrambled backward, hands and knees slipping across the floor. Oil slicked your palms, shards stabbed your flesh, but you didn't feel a thing. Crash! You knocked over the room's only stool in your panic. The clatter shattered the silence like thunder. The noise seemed to trigger the thing in the coffin. Its movement surged forward. It braced itself against the coffin edge and lunged out, its torso twisting grotesquely. You could hear cloth rustling and joints popping under strain. You lunged for the door, fumbling with trembling hands for the bolt. Your fingers touched cold wood. You pulled nothing. It wouldn't move. The bolt, where was the bolt? You hadn't locked it. You were sure. You hadn't touched it while that thing was scratching outside. How could it be locked from the outside? Cold sweat drenched you. Behind you, thump. A heavy, wet thud, like a soaked sack hitting the ground, followed by a raspy, satisfied exhale. Whew. It was out. It was behind you. You whipped around, pressing your back hard against the cold door, staring in despair at the center of the room. The outline of the coffin still loomed in the corner, but now, just a few steps away, stood a shorter, human-like shadow, right where the stool had fallen. It seemed to tilt its head slightly, and though you couldn't see its eyes in the dark, you felt its gaze locked onto you. The oppressive chill of death pressed down like a tidal wave. Run! You had to run. The window, the only window, was on the wall behind the coffin. Like a brand had seared your skin. You lunged toward the window. In the darkness, you could only go by memory and vague shapes. Your foot slipped lamp oil. You caught yourself and hurled forward, throwing yourself at the shut window, its boards nailed tight. Just as your fingers scrambled desperately at the nailed planks, a gust of cold, rancid, blood-stinking wind slammed into the back of your neck. You turned in horror. That shadow had silently, impossibly closed the distance. It was right behind you. That gray, lifeless face was just a blur in the dark, but its clouded, dead eyes seemed to be staring straight into yours. An icy, rigid hand, filled with unnatural strength, clamped onto your wrist as you gripped the window frame. The freezing cold spread instantly from your wrist to every inch of your body, as if even your blood had turned to ice. The grip was inhumanly strong. Like an iron vise, you couldn't budge no matter how hard you struggled. The stench hit you full force, making you gag. "Ugh!" you screamed in agony, your free hand pounding, clawing at the dead hand on your wrist. It was ice hard, like frozen wood. Your nails scraped over it, leaving only shallow white marks. It was no use. It didn't react to your struggles. The other hand, equally cold and rigid, rose fingers outstretched like a skeletal claw. It reached slowly, directly for your throat. The movement was sluggish, but the pressure it carried was unbearable, inescapable. "It's over." Cold despair gripped your chest. You could feel the death-tainted chill from that claw brushing your skin, closing in on your throat. At the very last instant, bam! 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 Thunderous pounding erupted behind you. A young man's voice shouted hoarsely in panic, "Hey! Open up! Open the door! What's going on in there?" It was the innkeeper's son. He'd heard your scream. The sudden noise felt like someone had hit pause. The claw froze midair. The grip on your wrist loosened, barely, but enough. The dead eyes turned, ever so slowly, toward the door being pounded from the outside. This was it. Survival instinct gave you one last burst of strength. You twisted your wrist with everything you had and threw yourself sideways. Rip. Your sleeve tore, your wrist burned with pain, but you broke free. You crashed to the ground, rolling toward the corner. Your back hit the hard, cold coffin, but you didn't care. You scrambled away, desperate to put distance between yourself and the thing. It seemed to be completely fixated now on the door being slammed. It released you completely, turning stiffly toward the trembling door. From its throat came a low, guttural growl like a beast warning intruders as it stepped slowly, deliberately toward the source of the noise. "Open it! Break it down!" the old innkeeper shouted from outside, his voice cracked with fear. The pounding intensified. Dust rained from the shuddering door. The corpse reached out its claw-like hands, almost touching the trembling wood. Then crack! A deafening bang exploded through the room. The decaying door latch and its rotten frame gave way under the force. Splinters flew everywhere as the door burst open from the outside. Blinding light flooded in a blazing torch, raised high in the innkeeper's son's hands. The flame drove back the shadows at the threshold, revealing everything inside. There he stood, gripping a thick wooden beam like a weapon, face twisted in horror. The firelight danced across the corpse just 2 steps in front of him, dressed in a mud-smeared burial shroud. Its gray face, milky white eyes, and cracked purple lips were all illuminated in vivid detail. It flinched from the sudden light and commotion, raising one arm to shield itself, growling furiously. "My boy!" A shrill, broken wail rang out from behind. A grieving woman tried to rush in, wild with grief, but the old innkeeper held her back with all his strength. "Hold it down now!" he roared at his son, his voice warped by terror. The son stood frozen by the impossible sight, but his father's cry jolted him, his face twisted, fear overridden by fierce determination to protect. With a beast-like snarl, he hurled the torch at the corpse and charged like a bull. Bam! The torch slammed into the corpse's chest, sparks flying. The impact sent it stumbling back a step. The innkeeper's son tackled it, wrapping both arms around its waist, trying to bring it down with all his strength. Grah! The corpse let out an inhuman scream, shrill and furious. It lashed out, arms swinging with terrifying force. The innkeeper's son was flung across the hallway like he'd been hit by a charging ox. "Ah!" he screamed, crashing into the wall with a sickening thud before collapsing. The torch flew from his hand, rolling aside and dimming. "Ah, Sheng!" the innkeeper cried, eyes wide with horror. Freed, the corpse turned back to the light and the crowd beyond the door. It growled again, taking another step forward. But then another twist of fate. From outside, a flash of blinding lightning split the sky like an axe, and a moment later, crack! Coom! Thunder crashed directly overhead, shaking the entire wooden inn to its bones. Dust and debris rained down like a storm from the ceiling. The thunder carried a power pure, searing, righteous, or maybe just an instinctive force of nature against the unholy. The corpse froze as if struck by an invisible hammer. Its charge stopped cold. The light in its eyes vanished instantly, replaced by a hollow, vacant stare. Its arms dropped limply to its sides. Then, like a felled tree, it collapsed backward, heavy, rigid, lifeless. Thud! It hit the cold floor, kicking up a small cloud of dust. The eyes stared blankly at the ruined ceiling, void of all life. Silence followed, broken only by ragged breaths and the woman's stifled sobs. The old innkeeper was the first to move. Trembling, he pulled a crumpled yellow talisman from his coat, its edges wet with sweat, ink smeared into twisted symbols. Chanting shakily, he stumbled inside, not daring to look at the corpse. Eyes shut, he slapped the charm onto its forehead. At first, nothing seemed to happen, but the old man collapsed to the ground, utterly spent, gasping for air. His son struggled to his feet, clutching his chest, staring in shock between the corpse and you still curled in the corner, pale as a ghost. His eyes were full of confusion. Sometime during all this, the rain had stopped. Now, only the quiet drip of water from the eaves tapped against the dawn silence. A ghostly gray light slowly seeped through the cracks in the boarded-up window.